Okay, we're on. This is the video that I do with my daughter Becky
Hello.
and Lou. Oh, and Han. Han was just jumping on me. I got up about 20 minutes ago. I don't know if they will testify. My daughter will and Lou. I'm like, let's do the video right now. And they're like, what's up with him? Because I'm watching CNN News and I'm already like, oh, you got to be kidding me. I'm going to do a little thing. My daughter asked me to mention Brexit. Today's the Brexit. Great Britain voted to leave the EU. Why am I mad? Just like I got up. I'm going to do it now. CNN, which was on in the background, I talk about media bias. The headline story was Trump talks golf over Brexit. Donald Trump is in Scotland because he opened up a golf course. Now, obviously, he's going to be discussing the world news of Europe because he's in Scotland. We could lower that, Lou, because it's loud. And in brief, I'll tell you why I was upset. The Brexit's a pretty big thing. I've already talked about it on a previous video. And today I was surprised that Great Britain decided to leave the European Union. I'll discuss it in a second. But how you can have the top story on CNN News saying Trump talks about his golf course instead of Brexit, because Trump was being interviewed, which I saw, because he's in Scotland on one of his business things, not a political thing. And that was top news. Do you know there's a lot of criticism against President Obama? One of them was during the time, one of the attacks that we had, where our people were killed. The president was playing golf the day they were killed, when he knew they were killed. Now, the media, if you want to say Trump was an idiot because he's talking about a golf course on a day where there was a vote to leave the European Union, you're fine to discuss that if you want. But the media did not discuss the fact that the president actually went and played golf after some Americans were killed. And even people in his party said that that was not right for him to do. That's the CNN. So that shows you the stupidity of it. Because, and David Gregory, who is a commentator on CNN, I used to watch David Gregory. You know what his statement was? I wrote it. He said, it is impossible and irresponsible for the media not to criticize and ridicule Donald Trump right now. Is it that impossible to not ridicule him while you allowed Hillary Clinton to get off with the fact that Ambassador Stevens was murdered? And Ambassador Stevens actually asked to have extra protection at the embassy in Libya, and you allowed him to die, and you didn't bring that up. I think I'll lower it all the way, Becky.
You won't, yeah.
Because that's Joe Biden talking. And Joe Biden, you know, he's thrown me off. That's what we're going to talk about today, was prophecy and the Antichrist, and that's basically why I can't hear Biden in the back. No, I'm just kidding. All right. The Brexit was this. I'm going to do it real quick, and then we'll try and talk a little bit. But that got me upset to see a world news thing on a world news day, and for your main headline to be Donald Trump talks about his golf course. And you didn't even criticize the president when he went and played golf the day when some of our American citizens were murdered in one of the famous cases of where our people died. That's hypocrisy. That's irresponsibility. Now, Brexit was this. My daughter asked about it. Great Britain, which most of us talk about as England, and over time, I did a little history of nation states and the development of nation states. But England was the great power. Britain, then you have Great Britain, which over time, you know, other areas became part of it. Okay, so that's kind of what Great Britain was. Scotland and Ireland and all is Great Britain. But as time went on, you had the European Union, which included I forget exactly offhand how many other countries, maybe around 20. I could be a little off on that. But eventually you had Germany and other countries that all became part, not of Great Britain, okay, but they all became part of what's called the European Union. And you had the European Common Market, a currency, and when that passed later on, after Europe became a common union, then the common currency, and the reason that they thought that would be a very big thing was that European Common Market, that common currency, it would be like the biggest trade bloc for all that region because they all joined. And the idea was their strength and unity. Now, many who are, you could say, liberal or to the left of the political aisle, they were more for the European Union staying together. And some who are on the right side, the mayor of London, who they kind of compare him to Donald Trump, they were pushing for the Brexit, which meant let's vote that Great Britain once again will become independent of this larger European Union. All right. There were various reasons they did this vote, but for the most part, it was what the people decided to do. I was watching the tallies live last night on my Sky News, which is kind of like a CNN, and I was surprised at the numbers. I mentioned that already. Now, how much of a shaking it will be, I don't know. The reason people did that, I was talking to my daughter Rebecca, and I said it would be, I tried to give a little parable. I said, some people actually push for Texas, the Lone Star State, to become independent of the United States. Now, there are people that are pushing. We want to vote. We want, Now, will that ever happen? I seriously doubt it. John, do you want Texas to be independent from the United States? No, I don't. But that's what happened in the Great Britain thing. You had enough people over time and enough politicians on the conservative side in the British Parliament who said they got it for a vote. And this vote was upcoming. They were waiting, for months and months and months. And the Prime Minister of Great Britain, David Cameron, who would be sort of like the Democrat on our side of the pond, meaning this side of the world. And David Cameron was sort of like, you would say, the more liberal politician. And it would sort of be like President Obama in our country fighting against a Republican Congress. So David Cameron was saying, we do not want to vote to leave. And if we vote to leave the European Union, it'll be a disaster. And if we vote to leave, so now he was going on like that for months because he sincerely believed it would be better for Great Britain to stay in the European Union. But he lost. And last night, when the more conservatives saw that they were going to win, they put out a statement and said, but we also want David Cameron to stay as our prime minister, as our president. They did that in a way to kind of tell him, just because you lost, Mr. President, we still want to honor that you're our president. But he did not accept that. He said, no, I'm going to step down. He's not stepping down today, but he said in a few months I'll step down because I wanted to go the other way, and Britain has chosen a different course. But the thing is, the people decided to vote. The other hypocrisy in the media is this. It would have been better for CNN just now, just to talk the story. Everything is about how Trump is so wrong on this. Trump is wrong and Obama's so right. President Obama went to Great Britain about a month ago. And President Obama said a statement that if Trump said, they would have crucified Trump if he said it. And what was a statement that President Obama made? This is what he said. He tried to support his partner, David Cameron, who's the prime minister. They're both, quote, liberal. And he said, well, if Great Britain leaves, we're going to keep trading with the European Union and making deals. But Great Britain, you're going to be at the back of the aisle. Now, that was a derogatory statement that he made. And that got a lot of people in Britain mad because they said, we are having a vote in our country whether we're going to stay in the European Union or exit. And for you as an American president to come to our country and to say, if you decide by democracy that you're going to exit the European Union, me as the president of the United States, I'm putting you on notice that you're going to be at the back of the line for our future trade agreements. That was a threat. If Donald Trump said something like that, that would have been the end of it. But the media kind of played that as, not a big thing. So if the bias of the media is actually affecting world events, is actually not reporting right, then they have abandoned what their job is. Now, I didn't have a particular subject today. Let's see, I did the CNN thing, the Trump talk. Look at how I wrote my notes when I was getting ready like 20 minutes ago. I wrote Trump golf course, and I put like 3, I was ready. I jumped up. Let's do the video right now. And they're like eating, what's up with my dad today? Just it upsets me. We could talk a little bit about, but I wanted to ask Becky, do you have anything, this is the social justice group, any particular things that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, so what we've been doing for Alice Animal Control is we've been trying to get them to be more of a community development program instead of it being kind of basically what's been going on, the last 20 years. Alice Animal Control has been more of like a private kind of corporation.
Which is, for those that are my friends in the Northeast, that would be like we call a dog pound. That's what it is, basically. The place.
Animal Control Dog Pound, yes.
Okay.
And so we've been trying, we met with the city manager the other day, me and a couple friends, and he really didn't have too much to say, but, he was just like, yeah, I'll try to get you basically a gate time. So basically, we go over there to try to network these dogs, these animals that are getting dumped out there, or strays that they've picked up, to get them homes. And so he's like, we'll try to get you gate time, because we go over there and we'll sit there for an hour or 2 hours waiting for people to come back to open up the gates when they're supposed to be open and they're not open. And so then I guess we found out last night that Alice City Council basically overthrew a lot of stuff, and now their stray hold is basically, instead of 5 days, now it's 3 days. And they're kind of just going behind our backs, and they're not really telling the community what's really going on with Alice Animal Control. And so now we're just kind of like, we're dealing with that. But the corruption and the nepotism is really, really bad over there, and a lot of people just don't know what's really going on and how better it could be for just the animals in general and the people. And it's really upsetting that they just kind of do what they want to do. There's no votes on these things. There's no, nothing. They went into private session, actually, and this is when they decided to change these things for Alice Animal Control. And it's real corrupt.
The Alice, I'll mention too, because, I do watch a lot of news. Alice, yeah, Han that's my little pit bull that I like to play with. Alice, it was on the news because I look at the news every day. But they had 2 ladies that were working at the Alice Animal Control, and then they had a video because some girl called that there was a dog and the dog was sick, and they had on video one of the Alice Animal Control ladies dragging that dog with, what did they call that?
The rabies pole.
Oh, they were just dragging the dog, sort of like, just dragging him along the ground. Well, that video kind of went viral, and so Alice fired that one lady that worked there for many years, and now you just have one lady left at the Alice Animal Control. And so some people, like my daughter, they were trying to say, look, maybe the community will do like a private type, not shelter, but sort of like a private animal control. Corpus Christi has an actual animal control, animal shelter, but they have a few different ones. Pee-wees are different ones where people themselves, have what you call no-kill animal control, meaning they drop off the cats or dogs and that they will never put them down. And so that's kind of what Becky was the last few weeks. That's one of the issues in Alice that they're kind of like working on.
Yeah, and in San Diego, though, I give props to the new city manager over there. She's been real open about getting their animal control facility set up better, and donations coming in to provide beds for the dogs, and trying to get it to be no kill. And they're working with citizens to try and hey, we're going to give you a warning. You need to get this done. If you don't get it done, we'll come back around in a couple weeks and we'll have to give you a citation. And I forget her name. I want to say Mary for some reason, but she's real straight edge and she's real straightforward with us and working with us, trying to get San Diego better. And that's just a small town outside of Alice. I mean, golly, how many people live over there? Like 2,000-3,000 maybe? Nothing. It's a little blip in the map. And Alice is so much bigger and they're so much more corrupt. It's really sad to see, a small town can do it, but a large city seems to not be able to want to do anything,
I was going to mention but she also mentioned it. So we live in a little area here where where we're sitting now is right outside of Alice, and this is called Sandia. But San Diego is a very little town right here. And I have to mention that because over the years, some people, like on the news, you might see 3 murders in San Diego on our local news. Oh, and then they don't distinguish San Diego, California. I mean, sometimes they don't even do it on the news, and I'm like, look, people around here are familiar with it. But one day, there was a homeless guy I saw downtown. This is a few years ago. And many people, when they're asking, I'm going to San Diego, what's the directions to San Diego? Around here, it means the little town. And one day I'm talking to some new guy that he just showed up into town. He's going to hitchhike to San Diego. And I'm talking for a minute, and he told me the directions somebody else gave him. I said, brother, let me ask you, San Diego where? San Diego, California. I said, okay. I said, because people are giving you directions to San Diego, the little city over here. I said, and you're like the normal person that lives in the real world when you say San Diego. So it is a confusing thing at times. We could talk a little bit about the concept of maybe mix it in with why people want to Brexit, or why the United States wanted to break away from Britain. During the debate, and this can fit a little bit with some of the history and stuff that we've been talking about on videos. The United States, us, that's who we broke away from. We broke away from Britain, just like Britain decided just now to break away from the European Union. And when the debate was going on these last few months, and some Americans, again, this is not to be critical of Obama, but when Obama went to Britain and said what I told you earlier on the video, he said, well, if you break away, you're going to be in the back of the line and all. Look, that should have been a lot of criticism the media should have given him, and they didn't. Instead, they criticized Trump for other things that were less influential, okay. One of the British people said, I remember, I think it was the mayor of London, who was very conservative. But I remember him saying, how dare the United States try to involve itself in our own vote when you yourselves had a war to break away from us? The United States history is we were British colonies. That's our history. And as British colonies, I taught this on some videos in the past. Maybe I'll try to, now I'm doing links and all. I taught one on what was the American Revolution. And I tried to explain how Christianity played a very important role in what took place. I might do that history real quick right now. The last other videos I made recently, History of the World #1, History of the World #2. There was a period of time in that brief covering of world history, and this period of time, I mentioned the Renaissance. Renaissance was that cultural revival that took place right around the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, in that period. And that was a cultural revival that many of the great books of knowledge and learning for many hundreds of years were stacked away and hidden. And many of them were hidden in certain buildings. What were the buildings? Does anybody know? Lulu? Becky? There were many great, okay. Sometimes I teach on philosophy, okay? And the three big philosophers, I could put these on, I'm not reading. The three big philosophers were men by the name of Socrates, I'll teach a little, Plato and Aristotle. And these men lived about 300 years before the time of Jesus. And these men were very intelligent. There was a lot of learning that took place at that time in a Greek era. Well, then you had the rise of the Roman Empire in the first century, and then you have eventually the fall of what we say the Roman Empire, which was in the 6th century. Okay, the invading Mongols and tribes. You could say it fell about that time. You don't really put dates on these like you do particularly. But then you had a period of time which was called the Dark Ages. Okay, now the Dark Ages were not really dark in every way, but the Dark Ages was a time of where the stability of the Roman Empire, it didn't have that same strength anymore, and the church, the Catholic Church, picked up the role of what most people understood as protection that you have in a government. You feel, I'm part of the United States, Britain, I'm part of Britain. And you have a certain protection, and you feel like those in authority are going to do what's right. But when you had a kind of the collapse of that influence, the Catholic Church picked it up. Now, during that time, you had monks and monasteries. And many of the great books of wisdom were stored in the monasteries, were stored in the churches and places like that. And those books were kind of that knowledge, particularly from the philosopher Aristotle. They were kind of just, nobody was looking at them anymore. You had a very great library in the ancient world out of Egypt. It was Alexandria, Egypt. And tragically, that whole library was destroyed and burnt, and so a lot was lost. But the monks had some stuff. These Catholic leaders had things that they saved in these old church buildings. And they were sitting around getting dust for hundreds of years. All right. You had a period of time what we called the Crusades, and this was a time where basically you had Muslims and Catholic soldiers fighting one another. But one of the results of the Crusades, going back and forth, was the refinding of these books. Like, wow, these books were missing for hundreds of years, and we found them again. And that's right around the period of 1100, 1200. Okay, there was a great thinker, Catholic leader. His name was Thomas Aquinas. And Thomas Aquinas lived in the 1200s. Well, as this knowledge of philosophy and Roman culture and thought started being reinstituted again, it was this revival of, oh, wait a minute. We have all these great works of art as well. You had, during what we call the Renaissance period, it's this period now coming into 1300s, you had out of a town in Italy, I forget the name of the town, but you had a family, I'll remember the name in a minute, but the family was the Medicis, okay, they were Italians, Medicis. Well, the Medicis were very influential. They were bankers and all, and they were strong Catholics. And out of these Medicis, they said, we got a lot of money, we got all these little wonderful things that are being restored during what's called the Renaissance, and they pumped a lot of money into let's promote art and learning and culture and all. And that's some of the great Renaissance artists were at that time. And you have Michelangelo and the famous artists. They were funded by this family and by the Catholic Church. And it was a good thing. It was like restoring of arts and all right? Now, all of this knowledge and all of this learning being restored, that's what the Renaissance was. We're getting back to all these original things that we lost for a long period of time. And I taught this before, and there was a man in the 1400s, a Catholic man, Desiderius Erasmus. He's referred to as a Catholic humanist, but that word humanism is different today than it was back then. But he said, if we're all getting back to the sources, now, there was a term called ad Fontes, Adfontes, which meant back to the sources. And everybody, not just in religion, but in culture, philosophy, and art, said, oh, let's look at the ancient sources again. This is fun. Let's today, a lot of people, if you're critical of Christianity, you're critical of just the whole thing about the Bible, at least one good thing you can say is, in the world today, if you walk into a bookstore, Walmart, a motel, this house, most places, if I were to ask you, find me a first century document, something from Aristotle. Go get me the book on Socrates up there. Go get me the Aristotle book. Most of you don't have that. But if I said go get a Bible, that's the only ancient book of ancient sources of wisdom that was actually written 2,000 years ago that is all over the place. So even if you don't believe in the doctrines of Scripture, even if you don't believe in the inspiration of Scripture, which I believe in that, you could at least say Christians have provided one source of ancient wisdom that's still sitting around available for everybody. Well, the Renaissance, men like Erasmus, said, being we're all trying to get back to the original, what was it like in the original? He got an original Bible, which was written in Greek, and he gave a Greek translation of the Bible. And so they were all starting to get back to, what does it really say? Never mind what the religion put on it. Never mind what everybody else said about it. What did the original document say? And that really sparked one of the great movements of the period, which we refer to as the Reformation. The Reformation was in the 1500s, and there was a great Catholic monk, priest, teacher, scholar by the name of Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was teaching at a university in Germany, in Wittenberg, Germany. And he's teaching in the 1500s out of this great Catholic university, and church was associated with it. And he's a professor. And now they're starting to do what? They're starting to read the original Bible from the Greek, because the translations, they were getting back to the original. And when Martin Luther's just teaching the students that were training for the priesthood, he's teaching from the book of Romans in the New Testament, which I wrote a whole commentary on the book of Romans on my website. And as he's reading the book of Romans, Martin Luther, he was a priest who, when he was younger, the town that he lived in Germany was a mining town. Mining, that was the trade. But Luther was going to study to be a lawyer. Okay, that's what he was studying for. And one day, Martin Luther was out, and there was this thunderstorm. And it was so bad, just last week, 30 people were killed in one day in a lightning storm. And I forget where it was, and I thought they were all out in the fields. I thought, that's a lot in one day. They're out harvesting and all, and I forget the country. But he's out, and there's 1500s. Martin Luther, his father, they had some influence, money and all. He says, I want my son to train to be a lawyer. And so when you train to be a lawyer back then, what do you study? You also study languages. You also study law. That was it, part of the education. But he's out one day, and there's this real bad lightning storm. He thought he was going to get killed by the lightning. And this is what he says. Saint Anne, why Saint Anne? That was a Catholic patron saint. Saved me, because she was the patron saint of those that were in the mining industry. That's why. And he said, if you save me from the lightning, I will become a priest. I will not be a lawyer. I'll be a priest. Just save my life. Now, he doesn't die, and sure enough, he becomes a priest. That's how he became a priest. Well, eventually he becomes very smart, but Luther had this tremendous guilt of sin. And in the Catholic Church, there were certain processes you went through, repentance and so forth. But Luther had a couple of church leaders over him that were Catholics. And when he's training, to be the priest, what Luther kept doing was he went to one of his leaders and he kept saying to his leader, confessing all types of sins, like, oh, I did this, I did that, I did this. And they realized that he seemed to have a problem. He seemed to never be able to, have peace. And he was trying a lot of the religious rules of the day to have peace, and he could never have peace. And it's important when you study Reformation Protestant theology.
For me.
He had a particular, Luther was, this is getting a little too deep, but I'll do it real quick. He was an Augustinian monk. He was an Augustinian monk. Augustinian monk meant go all the way back to the time of a great bishop by the name of St. Augustine from North Africa, Hippo. And that was the order of monks that Luther, 800 years later, is training under. But St. Augustine taught what we call the doctrine of grace or sovereignty, which Paul teaches in the Bible, which meant you don't try to save yourself, but God freely saves you, and it's not your work. And one of his leaders, when he was under all this guilt, Martin Luther, training to be the priest, one of his leaders showed him and said, you need to settle down in grace. You can't be worried all the time trying to make yourself saved. Well, he becomes this great teacher, this great scholar, and he's teaching these kids in a university in Germany. He's teaching from the book of Romans. And what he reads in the book of Romans was that the righteousness of God is by faith, and it's not by works. And he has this epiphany. He realizes, wait a minute, I don't have to really go through all these religious things that I've been going through. Okay, I taught a whole study. I'll link it to this video now that I'm doing links. But at that period of time, you had some other things going on. How, Dad, Becky might be asking me, because I have to get to prophecy, and I just heard her saying, how the hell does this fit in with Brexit? Okay. Brexit, or Europe, this is the same area that actually the Brexit took place in, but Europe was in some upheaval at this time of history. It's 1500s now, because you had the Great Renaissance, but you had the other revolutions taking place, and the Catholic Church, though it lost all of its influence to a great degree, but it was still a monolithic church, meaning the priests, Luther himself, the university in Germany, the Catholic universities in England, they were still under the authority of a little city in Rome. Now picture that. There was a little city in Italy, which is Rome, and in that capital city of Rome, you still had the main church, which was called the Vatican Church. And why should these priests and these other churches that were in England and Germany, why should they keep having to take orders and be under that church over in Rome when England and Germany and other, quote, nation states are getting their own independence now? See, for many hundreds of years during the Dark Ages, these other countries, they didn't have their own military and navy and all that. That developed over time. But at the time of Martin Luther, 1500s of world history, you had Spain, you had England, you had countries that were developing navies and armies and so forth. Coastal countries as well. Now, England is going to be the most predominant because Britain becomes the real powerful force as time rolls on. But at this time, at this season of 1500s, they're all developing independence. So what are the people in England at this time, 1500s, and Germany, what are they starting to feel? We don't want to be any influence under Rome anymore. The Church of Rome, she played her role, but we don't need to be under her anymore. And so some people in general, there were people in general that said, we want a Brexit, okay? We want to exit. It wasn't the European Union, but it was that idea of what we call the Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne. That goes back now to the 9th century, but I won't do all that. The Holy Roman Empire, when quote, the Roman Empire fell, which I told you was right in around the 6th century, you had something that tried to make up for it. and that was called the Holy Roman Empire under Emperor Charlemagne, but it never was really like the Roman ruling empire anymore. And so the countries at this stage of the game, you had the Renaissance, you had the scientific revolution taking place, you had the thinkers coming up, and they said, we all want independence. But Martin Luther, when he was just teaching Romans, and he broke away eventually from the Roman Catholic Church, and that's a big history there. But he did it not just for independence of Germany, being independent of Rome through the church. He did it for scriptural, biblical reasons, because he had this enlightenment when he was reading the book of Romans that we're justified by faith and not by works. And he eventually butted heads. They had meetings. The Catholic Church, the Pope in Rome was the head of the church at that time. And he's hearing that there's this priest in Germany who's teaching out of the university, and he's got all of his students in like a little revolt over there. They're all like going with the Bible. And so finally, news gets back, and initially when the Pope at Rome heard about Luther, initially he thought, that's just one little priest out there in Alice causing trouble, no big thing. But eventually it was a revolt, and the Pope finally would write a letter, a bull, if you will, a papal bull, but a letter, encyclical, one of them, and said, there's a wild boar at loose in your vineyard, God. And the Pope was talking about Martin Luther. He said, you're rebelling. Now, England decides also to break away from Rome. This is independence, is what they want. But England does it for a different reason, because Henry VIII wanted to get an annulment from one wife so he could marry another. And the church was so powerful at that time, the Catholic Church, that King of England, in order to not get a divorce but an annulment so he could remarry, that King of England had to get permission from the Pope in Rome. And they tried to do some rules, like the King of England, Henry VIII, and finally the Pope didn't give him the annulment, and they broke away from the Roman Church too. Well, they were all trying to, at that stage of the game, they were all trying to get also independence, and they did gain that. And you had in France, kind of a tragedy happened, because in France, now you're talking about right in the 1700s, at the end of 1700s, you had right around the time of Napoleon, comes a little bit after, but what you had was called the French Revolution. So the people in these countries were saying, yes, we could finally break free. But the French Revolution, which some of our founding fathers approved of at the time, okay, in this country, okay, because French Revolution's happening a little later, but they were just in total revolt. They were like, we're going to kill these priests, and they did. They said, hey, we're out of the church. Let's go down to the Catholic Church. Let's murder. They killed, it was pretty much of a disaster. But in their minds, they were saying, hey, look at this. We're all breaking away now. Well, and the French Revolution was a disaster. I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, or if I got it right, Thomas Jefferson, and also Franklin, at the time of the French Revolution, okay, because we had our great American Revolution. And at the time of the French Revolution, some of our founding fathers were like, oh, yes, this is great. This is the way it is. But others were thinking, wait a minute, this is maybe more of an anarchy than a revolution. And our history is what? Why was some of the Brits upset with us this last few months? Because our history was a little more, if I went a little more, when the English church broke away from Rome, they had what's called the Church of England, or the Anglican Church, but they were still very much Catholic. And King Henry is going to have some children, and one of the reasons he had a lot of problems, he couldn't have a son. He had a hard time having a son from various wives, but he does have kids. But after Henry, you had Queen Elizabeth, and you had another queen called Mary. She was the Catholic queen. They called her Bloody Mary because she went on the other side against the Protestants, but they both fought each other. And some of the Christians in England, they liked the way Martin Luther in Germany did his Reformation. the Reformation in Germany was, we're breaking away from the Roman Church, and in Germany you had the rise of the Protestant Church. We refer to it as Lutheran, but you also had Calvin and another guy. But England said, look, we are back to the Bible Puritans. We're going to get back to the Bible. We don't want any of the rules of the Catholic Church. We don't want any of the bishops and all this. All we want is the Bible. These are like the original Puritans. But the Church of England was just like a Catholic Church still. So, over time, some of those people wound up, they went to different places, but over time they come to the United States. And they say, oh, we're going to have freedom in this country. And then you also had others that started coming to the United States at this period of time. But when the people from England and that part of the world came, the founding country, we were part of Britain, okay? We were British colonies. That's what we were. So how did we become the United States? How did we have our Brexit? Where we said to Britain, we're going to have a war with you. That's the history of our Revolutionary War, which I'll link. I taught that. I'll put a link on this. So our history is, we don't want Britain over us. We want independence. Because everybody wants independence. And some of the Brits this week were mad at us. They said, you know, Mr. Obama, you came over to our country a few weeks ago, and you criticized us for wanting independence. And I heard the London of mayors say, but your whole country is a country of rebels, in so many words. You wanted independence, and you killed our soldiers, British soldiers. That's what our war was. We had to fight. Now, what about in the Bible? What does it say about these issues? I put a verse on my door the other day. You've seen it recently in the videos. Here have we no continuing city, but we seek one to come. Did Jesus start a revolution? He did. He said, this is another kingdom that I'm introducing. Your allegiance is going to be to the kingdom of God, and it's not to no earthly place. And that verse, here have we no continuing city, in the New Testament, Peter says, we are strangers and pilgrims. King David in the Psalms all the time is talking about God, going to God. So, in Christianity, Jesus also led, if you will, a revolt. He said to the people that were followers of him, he said, you're going to come out of the kingdoms of this world. Look, there's a verse in the book of Revelation. It should fit. And in Revelation, written by John, it says, come out from among Babylon. Now, Babylon was not just a literal place, which is Iraq, but Babylon was also a symbol of all the stuff that's going on, all of this stuff. And it said, come out of Babylon, my people, so you will not be partakers of her sins and of her judgments. So Christians and some of the Puritans I mentioned, they began saying, you know, we're not going to go to the dance halls, and some took it too far and said, we're not going to go to movie theaters or things, but the principle was, don't be a part of the world. So in our understanding, we are in the world, this is in the book of John, but we are not of the world. So we're not so attached to whether Brexit happens or whether the U.S. has a big, because the Christian's faith is in the kingdom of God. So we're trusting God, and so we do have independence. We have independence. I think I told long enough. We had independence through Christ, and we did our Brexit from Babylon, from the world. Okay, but now anyone want to talk? Lou, you could put the fan back on if you want. We're still on the video. Okay. I just warning you, because I know, like, I'm talking, she might think it's off, and Lou sometimes curses a lot, so I wanted to warn her. Nah, I cursed a lot on some of the recent videos.
Oh, yeah.
So, any more? Lou, you want to say anything about Alice or about... Okay.
It would take like
my hand
5
is...
years of video.
Oh, okay. So, any questions? I did a lot of history on that. I'll have to add a lot of notes later when I look at it.
Yeah. Well, so...
Okay.
Because they're exiting the European Union.
Yes.
Basically, so their money's going to be different now?
Well, that was when they formed... See, that's why it could be a little confusing sometimes in the sense that when they became the European Union, initially, but then they also had like later they had this common currency and all. But for instance, Greece is having like bankruptcy problems and all this, and so the question was, are they going to go back to the drachma, which would be the Greek money type thing? Now in Europe, now that this is going to take place in Britain, now that this has taken place, you have different areas in Great Britain, which is bigger than the history I just spoke of, which was just primarily England. So Great Britain would include the other areas, and I'm not sure what they're going to do with the currency, how that's going to work. But I'm sure they're not going to be in that common currency anymore. But look, there were legitimate reasons for these people to want to be out, and one is Germany did not want Great Britain to exit. Why? In the European Union, you have some countries in there that are in trouble, like I just mentioned, Greece, financially. Well, when they all joined this wonderful European Union, let's all join together, that the idea was everything's going to go well. Well, now some are heading to bankruptcy, and what are they doing? They're saying, hey, Germany, you're one of the strongest economies in this new union. We want more from you. We want more from you. You need to bail us out. You need to get this. You're part of our banking system and all. Now, a lot of people in Germany were starting to get mad, like just because the people in Germany were saying, look, the reason our country is financially stable and we don't want to bail you out over in Greece, one reason is we got to work until we're whatever, 70 or whatever, 60-something, and we don't retire at 50. And the people in Greece had a different attitude. They said, oh, no, I'm not blaming the Greek people, but I'm saying the people in Greece, some of the countries have like, you're going to work 3 days a week and you're going to be off 4 days or whatever, just as an example. But some of the other countries were more conservative. We're working 6 days a week. We're not taking 3 days off. We're not getting up at 2 in the afternoon. So you had some of the resentments. How would you like it if you lived in a city where you're working nonstop, you saved all your money, you got everything going good, and then say if the city next to you, Alice or whatever, say if nobody's working, but you're all joined together in one big county, and all of a sudden the one city that nobody's really pulling their weight says to the other city that's doing everything, well, we're all together now in the county, so we want to raise your taxes over, example, Sandia. Everybody's working nonstop in Sandia, and everybody's sitting around in Alice just eating tacos all day. And you're running out of money because nobody's working in Alice, as an example. I'm not saying this is true. Well, wouldn't you think the people in Sandia would be mad? All right. This has happened in the European Union situation. Germany was financially stable because they had you could say a strong work ethic, which they do. Now, Germany was worried when Britain was going to break away. Not so much because they loved the European Union, but Germany was like, wait a minute, Britain, you're stable like we are in Germany, but the others in our union are some of them are loafing around and not pulling the weight. And if you exit Britain, now they're all going to be banging more at Germany's door. We want you to bail us out. So there was a lot of politics in that. And I think probably at the heart of it, Germany wishes they themselves could exit. And when Britain did it, which they did, it was like every man, I think, is going to start going for themselves. And the country, even Greece, had referendums and all to exit. Because even though they were financially in trouble, they felt the European banking system was putting too many regulations on them. So there's a lot like that plays a role in it.
Oh, wow.
See? Okay. Anything else?
Sounds good.
Okay. Any questions, Lou?
Big topics.
All right. So we did a little bit. This would be like, I could title the whole video Trump's Golf Course. Out of all the various things. I'll tell you, it just got me mad because I was sitting here. I told my daughter when I got out here, I said, I want to catch some news before we do the video. And so they're thinking, it's going to be an hour. He wants to watch the news. And then I'm seeing top story. I mean, today's such a big day. It'd have been like if Martians invaded the planet, CNN's top story would have been Trump talks about the golf course instead of the Martians. No. If the Martians invaded, that'd be the big story. I want to see the Martian chip. Oh, man, there's aliens. No, Trump is talking about, and that's what they did. And a very important news day, CNN had the gall to make that the top headline. And then to have David Gregory say, I wrote it down, I was so mad. It's impossible for the media to not ridicule Donald Trump. Is it impossible for you to not ridicule Hillary? Is it impossible? No, because you don't ever hold her to account. So I have a feeling, and one thing I'll say, the polling numbers in our country right now, I think are a lot like what they were doing in the Brexit. Because they weren't showing the right numbers. Because this last week, all the polling was showing that Britain was not going to exit. But as I watched live last night, region after region was coming in, everyone was going the other way. And the polling ended about what I looked at in the beginning, like 51 to leave, 47 to stay in or whatever. It stayed steady. Right now, they're saying in our media that Hillary Clinton is polling ahead of Donald Trump like 12, 13%. That's not true. And the reason it's not true is when you do those polls, there's another poll that they're not putting in. 50% of the Bernie Sanders voters, they say they will not vote for Hillary, they will vote for Trump. But when they do that poll, they're not including that because they're just saying how many for Hillary, how many for Trump, because they're neglecting the Sanders, those still in it. So it's deceptive. It's deceptive. But polling does that to try to trend people. I would predict Trump's going to win. I would predict he's going to win. And that's even if Hillary does not get indicted. And she might get indicted on some of the scandals.
She better, dude.
Okay, so that's it. God bless everybody. Let's pray. I'm going to pray at the end. Father, I thank you for a little meeting. And I pray that you would help everybody to learn stuff from the little videos that we do out here. Also, we bring up the issues that we feel are important, that we could play a role in social justice, even in the areas where we live. So I ask for you to bless everybody in Jesus' name. Amen. That's it. We're done.